Hi, everyone. Happy Thursday. I hope you all are safe and well and journeying on to Friday. My name is Yasmine-Imani McMorrin. I am super honored to be running for Culver City Council. During the day, I serve as the interim dean of students and director of diversity, equity, and inclusion. Sorry, y'all, it's been a long day for our city. I serve as the vice chair for the General Plan Advisory Committee. I hope that folks have checked the mail today, because you should find a goodie in there from the campaign. So let us know on social if you've seen it. Also, in the same vein, please go ahead and share out the stream. In these last few weeks and days of the campaign, the more eyes and attention that we get on Team Yasmine and the overall campaign, the more helpful it is. So our hashtags are hashtag Team Yasmine and hashtag Vote McMorrin. So please, if you're so inclined to share out, I would deeply appreciate that. And it's always good for the overall ecosystem and getting the word out. So just a little bit about the campaign and our campaign goals. So for me, equity is really at the center and the core of everything that I do. What I'd hope to do as a city council member is really and truly center equity and inclusion in every city policy, making sure that our budget allocations truly reflect our overall values. And ultimately, this is all about community well-being. So making sure that there are safe and thriving neighborhoods here in our community, and just making sure that whether you live, work, learn, or play here in our community, you're really met with a welcoming and inclusive space. So that's generally what we're about here. And I know across the banner, if you have any questions or concerns, please go ahead and put those below so we can address those. And honestly, Connect with Yasmine's and our town halls really just started because we wanted to be able to reach folks during this COVID time. We wanted folks to, of course, practice social distancing and wear masks and be as safe as possible. So this is a way that we can amplify campaign goals and really reach out to some cool and interesting folks and amplify the work that folks are doing here in Culver City, also and beyond. So I'm incredibly grateful to have Vice Mayor of Culver City Council, Alex Fisch, here with us today. I consider Alex a mentor of mine. He is definitely a housing champion here in Culver City. As always, anytime something is coming up on the dais about land, he's always raising and amplifying our critical need of housing in our community. Of course, the environment and sort of all the other progressive matters. But when I think about Alex, it's definitely thinking about housing. So I'm so grateful that he's here and spending time with us today. So welcome to Connect with Yasmine.
Thank you, Yasmine. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm not quite last, but I'm happy to be here at all.
Yes, you're last of the council members, so that's a cool distinction. Do you want to share any info about yourself to folks that might not know you that well?
Sure. Yeah, I was elected in April 2018, so I've been at this for 2.5 years, and it's really, I'm impressed with anybody who is willing to run for local office, especially women, because it is so difficult, and women, for a whole host of reasons, are sort of targeted and harassed so much more in the process. So I'm just grateful you're running. I hope you're hanging in there okay.
Yeah, I'm excited. What is it? We're at 12 days. I'm very excited about that. And I remember when I first started running, I don't know if I mentioned this on a Connect before, but people were always like, thank you so much for running. And I was like, oh yeah, like no worries, like super excited, but I totally get it. I totally get it now. So thanks for raising that. It's not something we really spent a ton of time talking about, but it is a lift. It is a lift. So thank you for acknowledging that. I wanted to touch a little bit on today, and you guys know we're pretty casual here and lots really conversational. But I really wanted to just touch on the overall political climate here in Culver City, about some of the monies that have been going around and some of the sort of misinformation that is being spread. And that's in conjunction with our just the overall races, but also when we're thinking about our local ballot measures that I hope we spend some time chatting about today, both no on B and yes on Measure RE. So I guess we can just open there. We moved, my daughter and I moved here in 2016, and I remember you coming to our door to canvass in 2018, and in New Jersey, people really don't knock on your doors. There's no term limits in New Jersey also, so it's something really cool here in Culver City and in California that folks are so engaged that they're willing to be a part of the process. But what I'm noticing about this campaign, again, I haven't been around for that many local campaigns, but there's a lot of negativity going around and a lot of money. I wasn't super clear on how much mailers really cost, and mailers are thousands of dollars. And so folks really have a lot of interest in certain outcomes. So I just wanted to start there and see if you just had any insight or perspective just about the overall political climate and the misinformation that's sort of swirling right now.
Where to even start? I think every campaign has the people who are most vocal and involved have been vocal and involved for a long time. And if you were just to base, if one were to assume that social media served as the town square, you would get local politics completely wrong. And one unfortunate thing about this campaign is that the candidates don't have the opportunity to canvass personally.
Right.
I didn't have a huge canvassing team. The people who did canvass for me were close friends who did a ton of groundwork, and they knew me well, and I think represented me well, and the results were clear, and they relayed people's concerns regularly. So, personally going around and talking to people and hearing directly from them and through trusted friends what their thoughts were was really valuable. And I mean, I think everybody sort of suffers, with this campaign, but I think you've done a great job of reaching out and making those connections in other ways, which is really key, and it's going to serve you well when you win. But the overall campaign, on social media, it's the same. People of all types say all sorts of things about the candidates. And I think another thing you've done really well that served me well was to not focus on it. Social media is the local politics id. And it can tell you something about that, but there's a whole ego and super ego out there that's a lot more thoughtful and a lot more ready, I think, for your message, which is a very nuanced one because you understand the issues. So in that regard, it's the same old. But even though people say this is the worst election ever, people are terrible. Karl Rove, I hear that. I've heard that since before. When I first moved here, there were people taking videos of each other taking signs down and stuff, and it's just very much the same thing. What is new in this one is the amount of money, and that's obviously comes down to two things. One, certain candidates have always been much better funded, and frankly, you are benefiting from the same thing I did, which is you have a lot of volunteer work. That's how I did it with Shoestring. That's always the case too. But the ballot initiatives, that's really interesting. I've heard some people speculate that the ballots are drawing, the measures, local measures are drawing a lot of money because it's on the consolidated calendar, the consolidated election, which I think is completely wrong. I mean, it's because that the two local measures are about money.
Yep, they are.
And that's what draws political spending.
Right.
You look at other people have documented Measure B's funding well, and I know that there's absolutely local contributions there, but there's also huge sums of money from outside because it's people who own Culver City rather than people who live in. And that doesn't mean they don't have a stake, but it's also different than residents who don't have $10,000 to kick in to pay for a ballot measure signature gathering process. And then
Yeah.
Measure RE, Measure RE, last I checked, was funded by 6 contributors, $70,000 approximately, from 6 entities. The Culver Studios, which I'm sure we'll have a good relationship with them, regardless of the outcome. But they're looking ahead 20 years from now at the fact that big commercial properties bear the brunt of that tax mostly, and
Right.
they are kicking in money. And the same with Kearney Properties. They're the ones who own the FedEx property adjacent to the Expo line. And then Venice Properties LLC, which I don't know, California Association of Realtors, which are looking at those big house flips and saying that people, sellers are going to be upset if they see a couple $1,000 more, in addition to the 6% that their constituency collects.
Mm-hmm.
Even though that's a tiny portion of what Measure RE does. And then the other one was a commercial property PAC. So 2 PACs and 3 or 4 major landowners in Culver City. So that's different. And as you affirmed, it's because it involves people's money.
Absolutely. So I do want to take a step back, because I think if you're new, if you're not super plugged into the measures. So Measure B is a measure that is effectively going to sort of repeal the current rent control and tenant protections that have recently been passed here in Culver City over a year long, arguably even longer than a year process. Considering the temporary freeze and all the outreach to tenants, landlords, and community members in Culver City by staff and other folks. So if that passes, which I absolutely hope it doesn't, because we definitely want to make sure, especially during a pandemic, that folks are able to remain in their homes and that they have access to tenant protections. And there's so much, the actual Lord, it's the end of the day. At the actual city council meeting where this was decided went well into 1 a.m. to, I can't remember the end time, but there's so much nuance involved in tenant protections and rent control that to assert that an average person, who's a valued member of our community, nothing against, our voters here, but it's really important that our city council members are able to legislate and effectively support and show up for all folks in our community, but particularly the, almost 50% of our community that are renters. So we want to make sure that folks are voting no on Measure B. And for Measure RE, which is really Vice Mayor Fisch's baby, I think. He raised this and really is rising moment where we're concerned about our most of our budget being really informed, or a lot of our budget being informed by our sales tax, and knowing that will decrease due to this COVID period that we're in. Folks are not buying as much in Culver City as probably they would be. And so this is allowing for a one-time transfer tax on real estate and commercial transfers that are over 1.5 million. And it is a progressive tax. It's my understanding that most of the houses that are sold here in Culver City are 1.3 million or somewhere around there. I myself just became a homeowner and purchased a condo. It would not affect me, probably, or anyone else in my building. So it wouldn't affect most people, but it really would allow us to create some buffer and allow us to support our community and our city during this time where we really want to make sure we remain solvent and can continue to thrive. So I don't know, Alex, if you want to add anything to that. I'm sure I missed some stuff, but I want to make sure that folks really hear from you on Measure RE, because we want folks to vote yes on that.
Sure, but I also want to touch briefly on a couple points you made. I want to amplify a couple points you made and add one thing on Measure B. There's 2 things that really trouble me about B. One is the retroactivity of repeal. I worry about the legal mayhem that would come from the rent freeze that was in place while we discussed long-term rent control provisions being retroactively removed, which is exactly what Measure B says. You can just look at the second provision of it. It says it right there. It's repeal retroactively, and that's very dangerous. And the other point you made is about the legislative process, which I think is important too, because I know it's true that most rent control has come on through ballot measures, and that's because of organizing. Because again, it's about money, so it's very difficult. And as a council member, I'm dropping off my kids with people who are affected by the things that we do, and so the more difficult decisions are tough, even if they're the right thing. So I think that kind of explains the problem, the reason that rent control usually goes the way it does. And what's key about legislation is that if we do it at the ballot box, or if we do it at city council, we're going to make mistakes. When we do it at the ballot box, you can't easily fix those mistakes. Look at, it's 50 years after Prop 13, or 40 something years after Prop 13, and we're still, working very hard to try and find fixes to things that were clearly not good for the state, like Prop 15 this year to repeal Prop 13 on commercial property over time. And especially when you don't start from that place of thinking about equity first, you make bigger mistakes, which is something I appreciate very much about your campaign. And it's the reason that I need you personally beside me, because it's not, I'm going to miss things. I'm not perfect on equity. And so you need multiple eyes to start from that place and not make as many of those mistakes. So, in Measure B, I think that's really important. The legislative process, starting with equity and tweaking, recognizing that you're going to make mistakes. And then, Measure RE, please stop me if I get going too much, because I can get going. A lot of people have the PAC that was formed by commercial property owners to oppose Measure RE called themselves Protect Culver City Homeowners, which is funny because of the people funding it. But certainly that's their messaging. And at the lower end, a criticism that people have had is that, well, why are you affecting me? And I want to take a second to address that, because I did that intentionally. I wanted personally to have skin in the game. I didn't want to have a measure where we're just hosing down commercial property owners. I do want to recognize that they're the most able to pay, but I don't want to pretend that I'm not able to pay when I eventually sell as well. I mean, I've enjoyed unbelievable asset wealth appreciation as a result of buying in Culver City 15 years ago. And I will be more, and now because of that, I benefit very much from Prop 13 as well. So my across the street neighbors are paying, 3 times more property tax than I am, and I'm paying 5 times more property tax than my neighbor. Measure RE is the tiniest little recognition of that fact. And because when I sell, this house is going to be a tear down probably. And so someone's going to be buying it for land value. And I didn't create that land value. We all did. You create that land value by contributing, by the work you've done on the school measure. Was it Measure K? You personally went out. Yep. You created that value that's in my home now. And a lot of other people have as well. We all together create that value. So, I wanted to sort of make that case, and I don't know if I've done it effectively, but that's the one thing I wanted to emphasize on Measure RE, which is it's not an accident that we just didn't simply, do what San Francisco did, do what Santa Monica's doing, where they set a very high threshold above the actual council members' home values and say, that's where the tax starts. You're fine. I want to say, I recognize that I'm better off than people who aren't going to have a home sale for over 1.5 million. The only other thing, and I am rambling, I'm sorry, but the only other thing I want to emphasize is I didn't appreciate how tricky it is and counterintuitive it is to think about marginal taxes and progressive tax rates. Right. But it's just like income tax. Like if somebody offers you a $10,000 raise annually, of course you take it, because at some level, yes, I enter a new tax bracket, but that doesn't mean that all of my income is taxed at that new bracket. It's just the additional bit. So, it's a sale at $1,500,000 and $1,000 triggers a Measure RE tax of $11. Whereas, because it's only that extra 1,000 that's subject to the 1.5% tax. Whereas the recent sale of the Symantec building for $120 million would have brought in $4 million for the city. And yeah, I mean, certainly we have a deficit to deal with because of COVID-19. We also have a massive $250 million deficit that was handed to this council for pensions. And I don't begrudge our employees their pensions. They earned them, but past councils did not didn't pay for them. They left it for us. And so our parks show that deficit. Our after school programs show that deficit. We've got families that don't have childcare, and we're not able to provide it because we are living under the austerity of Prop 13 and the decisions of past councils. So that's the short version of my little Measure RE rant.
Yeah. Well, thank you for that. I think it's good to amplify. I believe that we should absolutely be all right, supporting the ecosystem, supporting our community. And I think there's been a lot of misinformation. I think any new tax is like, no, I don't want any more taxes. But the fact that it only happens one time and it only happens when you sell and you're, most solvent and able to absorb a tax. I hope that folks will zoom out and see the big picture, see, like you've mentioned, how they've benefited from, the appreciation of Culver City over time that we were all a part of, as you mentioned, and hopefully folks are willing to vote yes on Measure RE. I hope that folks who are looking at this can make the little pledge to share this with your neighbors, share this with your friends here in Culver City, because there is a lot of misinformation sort of swirling about these measures. And we want to make sure that folks are really showing up, because it's so important for our overall community and our city. So I definitely want to encourage folks to share no on B and yes on Measure RE. So that's pretty much, we're coming up. We're a little over 20 minutes now, but was there anything else that you'd like to share with folks who are watching, or anything you want to close out with?
Yeah, I mean, I should have prepared a little list of debunking so that you and I could go back and forth and debunk some of those things. But there's been some good organic local media stuff on these measures. With B, the idea that it's just about voter choice. Well, then don't repeal what we've done. Right. I'm all for voter choice in many ways. I was key in, I was a critical part of opposing Measure CA a few years ago, which would have put the hiring and firing and supervision of the police chief under the city manager. And I think that was very wise. That was a voter choice thing where we wanted people to hold city council members accountable for policing issues rather than the city manager. Because I'd hate to be in the position of our city manager, who I think is excellent and is a real asset to the city, having to really be the one bearing the brunt of people's calls for reform, people's calls for a different approach to public safety that's more robust and more care-based, versus people who are absolutely opposed to any reform or any change to the status quo. So, I mean, that turned out to be provident, and that's a voter choice thing. So I'm not against the idea of voter choice, but that's not what Measure B is. It's a rent control repeal and barrier in voter choice clothing.
And I mean, just one more thing on that, like voters, I'm a member of Protect Culver City Renters, and voters were a part of the organizing, which, brought about the temporary freeze. And, folks who are a part of our community absolutely were sharing sort of the need and, the real life experience and the fear of not having any real protections outside of the landlord-tenant mediation board in our city. So voters organizing really brought about where we are right now. And I think it's a huge, again, like the lack of power analysis in the conversation of like, we're not listening or, So I hope that folks show up and vote no on B. Long story short, I can keep talking. I mean, I was a renter not too long ago myself, and I was afraid to speak out at that 2019 temporary rent freeze conversation because I was afraid of no fault eviction or whatever coming up and my daughter and I being in a bad situation. So this is real stuff affecting real folks who aren't always in the room, don't always have the dollars to donate to create a whole new ballot measure. So I think that's really important to point out. But thank you so much, Vice Mayor Fisch, for joining us and for sharing for leading on Measure RE, especially in such a critical time. I hope it really folks do vote for it and it gets passed. And just thank you for your leadership and your support and your mentorship. And since I've been here, I deeply appreciate it. And I know we're going to put up some contact information. There we go. So if folks want to reach out to our vice mayor, he is sort of very savvy on the Twitter streets. So check out his threads and all the cool stuff on there. So thank you guys so much. I know that the presidential debate is going on right now. That's where I'm headed after this. But thank you for your time. Our next Connect with Yasmine is going to be with school board member Dr. Kelly Kent on October 28th at 6 p.m. I also want to flag that we're having phone and text banking on October 26th. So please sign up if you'd like to. I hope you would to participate and be a part of that. And that's at votemcmoran.com/support. So please sign up to phone and text bank. We're in the last stretch, so we have to continue to get the word out about the campaign. So please head over to our website, Vote McMoran, to sign up. But thank you so much. I hope folks are doing well as you can and taking good care of yourselves. Thank you so much for being here this evening. Take care. Thanks so much, Vice Mayor.
Go Yasmine. Hang in there.